the Melnea Cass Recreation Complex in Roxbury is usually home to community groups, local sports teams, and after-school activities. Right now, though, it's home to dozens of unhoused migrant families, many of whom were sleeping at Logan Airport before Governor Maura Healey turned the complex into temporary shelter earlier this week. Temporary being the operative word for the governor.
First of all, it is temporary. We will be out before June. It is important to have this site available to the community.
But not everyone in the community is on board, and many are raising the question why this particular community center. I'm joined now by Elisa, the former president of the Boston branch of the NAACP, former regional director of the Federal Emergency Management Agency, and president of the Garrison Trotter Neighborhood Association in Roxbury. Also by reporter Sarah Betancourt, my GBH News colleague. She's been covering the state's migrant crisis for GBH News. Thank you both for being here. Sarah, you spent some time with a family at Logan a few days ago for a really great piece that you wrote for us. Can you just describe their situation a little bit? They were coming here from Haiti, but they'd had a long road to get here.
Yeah, absolutely. So on Saturday night, I spent a few hours at Logan Airport. And I was actually surprised to see there weren't a lot of migrant families. I think that was because there had been so much media coverage for the previous 3 days before. But after I'd waited around a few hours, there was a family. And the mother's name was Chrysla, and she was 30 years old. She had 2 children and a husband, and she was laying on a blanket. She was very heavily pregnant, and she talked about how they had journeyed from Haiti to the Dominican Republic and Chile back in 2017, but they struggled to build a life there, and she had heard that a lot of groups are willing to support families here in Boston, so they arrived in January to Texas and then came to Logan Airport this week.
And my recollection is that she was sick, correct? She was coughing, under the weather, as you spoke with her?
Yeah, definitely. And one of her children was as well.
And that family was here on humanitarian parole. Some of our viewers will know what that means, some will not. What is humanitarian parole?
So when asylum seekers cross the border and claim asylum, usually they're brought in by border agents or Customs and Border Protection. And sometimes they're detained for a few days, sometimes they're not. And they're usually released with some paperwork that says you can live here in the United States for 2 years without fear of deportation. Depending on the president, sometimes that's extended, but it really depends on the country you're coming from. And that's the paperwork that Chrysla's family had.
Okay, thank you. Elisa, you are steeped in this community that we're talking about here, where the unhoused migrants are now being given housing in the Melnea Cass Center. What is your sense of whether this is a move that is wise, is good for the community, or is not?
My first sense is this is an incredibly humane thing to do. That having people sleep at Logan Airport or on the street or any place else is not humane. And that is not what we're about as American citizens, and clearly in the city of Boston, this is supposed to be open and friendly. It's not the best move based on the logistics that it's supposed to come. That means for the amount of people that are there now, it's a workable site. For the amount of people that is supposed to come, they said possibly 400 people, that would be an incredibly poor choice of a place to have occupation.
One thing that I want to highlight here is we mentioned that you work for FEMA. You've also worked via FEMA for NATO, right?
Correct.
All over the world in a bunch of different disaster contexts. So you're intimately acquainted with this kind of stuff.
Disasters and crises, and from flooding to fires and things of this nature. So understanding that when people are in a crisis and that you have a challenging situation, you have to come up with a solution. So we should understand there are over 7,000 migrants that the state has been already housing. I think the issue with this being a population that were mostly Haitian, there's a need to have people to be able to communicate with the people that are coming in for their mental health and their social well-being. And so choosing this community might have been not just the move to get them housed, but also to put them in an environment where they might find people in which they can communicate.
I'm glad you mentioned that point. That's actually something that hadn't occurred to me, and that's an important point. Sarah Betancourt, what else is the state and what are private organizations that are working with migrants, what else are they doing to accommodate this continuing inflow of migrant families with the state's traditional shelter system at capacity?
So the shelter capacity is comprised of about 48% migrants right now. So that's about 3,623 families as of last Thursday. And a lot of refugee resettlement agencies and local groups like the Immigrant Family Services Institute, a Mattapan-based organization, have been doing this work for a long time and in earnest in the past year. We just published a piece a few minutes ago about what church groups are doing and also what private residents can do to support this. And that could be anything from opening up your home if you have an in-law apartment and going through an organization who will likely vet you in housing a migrant family for a few months, all the way to if you have a driver's license and you can take them to a local food pantry or to a doctor's appointment. Anything that's small or large is helpful, a lot of folks are saying.
Just so I'm clear on this, are there other sites akin to the Melnea Cass site that are currently being operated by the state? I'd seen some discussion, I think, on Universal Hub when I was reading that website of a site in Medford that was either opened up or might be opened up. Are there other sites like this, or is this the only one?
I don't know about a site in Medford, but in Cambridge, there's a former courthouse that's in operation to help migrant families. And that's been since just before December, when there was a deadline instituted by the legislature to have overflow shelters created. And in the past, Joint Base of Cape Cod has been opened up to migrant families twice during the Martha's Vineyard incident. And also more recently, I think it was last summer as well.
Elisa, when you said that this was not a good venue long-term, given the number of people who are going to be coming, what is it specifically about the Melnea Cass Recreation Center that makes it limited in terms of its ability to provide services?
The lack of lay-down space for people to stretch out. People are cramped together. The cots are like 1 foot apart. And there's not clear demarcations of where people are. When you have mothers and children with infants, mothers feeding, breastfeeding, and have all those other social and personal issues, you need to have more space. You need to be able to isolate them and let them isolate. The relationship of the restroom facilities, the bathrooms and showers, that creates a problem if you have children. You don't want your children to go too far away in order to be able to use facilities. The state has in this repertoire places they can go. My recommendation is to use the Shattuck Hospital that's still in operation, 85% of which is usable, 15% is being used by other programs. My idea is that when you mention the word refugees, they're not refugees because then we'd be under international regulations to manage them, but as migrants and legal migrants at this, we need to make sure they're being housed in a humane way. And I think that the challenge is for this center as to other places, this center had programs going on. They had youth programs, sports programs, and so it's challenging because those programs are now being displaced. Maybe for a short period of time, we might make the deadline, as the governor said, but now we have to say, how do we accommodate the young children who are in school, who live here and have challenges now? So we're going to be looking at the Reggie Lewis Center. I'm hopeful they'll be looking at Madison Park High School and other places that we might be able to, these young people who have programs might be able to go so that they're not totally left out in the cold.
I want to play a little bit of video from State Senator Liz Miranda, who was talking about her response to this particular situation. Let's take a look at how she framed it, and then I want to get both of you to respond to her comments.
We are a people who help people in their worst moments, and we have always been that. Now I wholeheartedly understand that our community has been asked to sacrifice a great deal. We are in a state of emergency, and none of us should stand by while women, children, and families sleep outside or in an airport who look like us.
So we saw some signs that were being held by people who were opposed to this move, which said essentially, Elisa, why here, why not Wellesley, yes. I believe. What do you think the answer to that question is?
Get educated. there are places around the state in which migrants are being housed right now. It's not just Boston. It's not just Chelsea. We've gone through a number of series of migrants and other people challenged it. Remember that during Katrina and Rita back in 2005, we had the challenge of getting migrants coming in. The Joint Base in Cape Cod was where they housed a lot of people. They were housed around the city. They don't understand what's going on when they put up signs like that. Wellesley may not be a site, but there are other sites throughout the state in which migrants are at. We're about 7,500 migrants in there now. But, I don't see the signs, when we have Ukrainian refugees or when we have people coming in from Kosovo and different places. It's only to a community where folks don't understand they're there for humanitarian reasons, and the senator was absolutely correct. This is a situation where the people in that center look like the people in this neighborhood, and many of them have relatives and friends, and they need to be there for social and emotional support. But there needs to be a clear obligation on the part of the state that they will get that center back in place, and if there's opportunities for young people and programs to go somewhere, we should work with that.
Sarah, how frequent is it to see people expressing concern about the burden being placed on a particular community when migrants or unhoused people are placed there?
Given the current state of housing and its price, and also the level of housing stock, it happens pretty often. But I have to echo a lot of what Louis said. There's a lot of municipalities ranging from Woburn to Lexington, dozens of communities that are emergency shelter sites and have brought in migrants through the state emergency shelter contract, local hotels and local shelters. And a lot of these communities have been incredibly welcoming. Now, when it comes to the Melnea Cass Recreation Center, I know there were other facilities that were considered, including East Boston's Suffolk Downs and also West Roxbury's, I think it was Recreation or Education Complex. I'm really curious to see why exactly Melnea Cass was chosen, but I think part of what Louis said about migrants feeling more comfortable there, a lot of their Haitian Creole being spoken in the area might be part of it as well. And it's going to be really interesting to see what happens in the future, because this issue isn't going away and people will continue to need humanitarian relief.
Louis, it's been suggested as this has played out that there may end up being some type of benefit moving forward for Roxbury, for the Melnea Cass Center in particular, that it may be refurbished, for example, that local vendors may benefit from this. It may sound callous for me to be talking about benefit to the neighborhood or benefit to the facility when we're dealing with people whose lives have been upended. But is that a reasonable thing for people to be thinking about, ways that there might be some sort of ancillary community benefit?
Well, part of the outrage from the community was that, yes, there will be benefits. There should be benefits, but some of these benefits should have taken place before the center was being used this way. And people were really upset that now that they wanted to use it for this particular purpose, they're saying, well, here's things we can do. Some of those things should have been done long ago. The Friends of Melnea Cass, which I'm a member, and Shirley Shillingford is the chair of the board, we've been asking for upgrades and improvements. Had they made that, this move might have been a little bit better, upgrading the facilities, the lavatories, and things of that nature. So, yeah, there's going to be some change. There's going to be some improvements. But throughout Roxbury, we've been asking for change, and DCR and the state, of course, is a partner in all the things that we're doing some way. So, yeah, there will be some things, but now there are things that can happen right now. But first, we have to deal with the humanitarian crisis that's with us. And for the majority of the community, they're good with that.
Got to leave it there. Louis, Elisa, and Sarah Betancourt, thank you both for being here to talk about this.